Hello everyone and welcome back to Chef Mel's Kitchen. So today's delicious recipe is going to be a gluten-free chicken, mushroom and bacon pie. Now one of my students asked me this week, because I was telling them about when I worked as a chef for a gluten-free company as a development chef, and I was telling them how my gluten-free barbecue chicken pizza was sold nationwide in all the Sainsbury's, not with my name on it because we were making it for Sainsbury's own brand. But one of my students said, oh, what's the point in making a gluten-free pizza? And one of my students, before I could say anything, one of my students chirped in and said, oh, just in case anyone, is allergic to gluten. And today I'm cooking this for my brother's girlfriend who is celiac. So celiac disease is when the body can't digest the protein found in wheat and other products, which is gluten. And when I worked for a pie company as well, so not the same gluten-free company, I won awards. I won a Taste of the West award for my gluten-free chicken and leek pie. But today, my brother and his missus aren't too fond of leeks, so instead we're doing chicken, mushroom and bacon, upon request, of course. Everyone always requests my pies. And I'm going to talk to you through the ingredients and stuff. There are a few challenges when you cook with gluten-free products, which I'll discuss as I go through the ingredients. So we'll start with the filling. We've got 150 grams of unsmoked streaky bacon. You'll need 2 tablespoons of oil. You'll need 640 grams of chicken thighs. I prefer cooking with chicken thighs because I find them more moist and more flavoursome, but you can use breasts if you want. 2 tablespoons of the gluten-free flour there, which we're going to dust in those chicken thighs to brown them. Salt and pepper, obviously. And then you'll need 1 white onion diced finely. 2 teaspoons of garlic salt. It is quite a garlicky dish. You can lower that if you want, but I love garlic. If you're going to use fresh cloves, use 4 cloves of garlic. Yeah, I told you I wasn't mucking around. You'll need a tablespoon of fresh thyme and about 1/4 teaspoon, so a large pinch of dried mixed herbs as well. I like the mixture of flavours from the different herbs, fresh and dried. So 640 grams, so the same amount of mushrooms to the same amount of chicken thighs. So 640 grams of chestnut mushrooms, also known as crimini mushrooms in America. Which are great because they've actually got more vitamins and minerals in them than sort of your standard white mushrooms. So not that this dish is incredibly healthy, but it's nice to sneak those vitamins in somehow. You'll need 100 milliliters of white wine. I've got Cava there, and you think, oh, why is Mel, using Cava? Cava's all posh and expensive, but that bottle only cost me £6, and we're only going to use 100 milliliters of it, so it's not too expensive. 800 milliliters of chicken stock. I'm just going to use 1 cube to make that because you've got enough salt from the bacon and other things, so that'll be fine. 100 ml of double cream, and we might use a little bit of flour to thicken up the sauce if we need to later, but I think it should probably do fine. So that's the filling, which we'll do first and then chill. And then your pastry, the pastry is very, very similar to what I did with the empanadas the other day, which is so we're going to use 380 grams of plain gluten-free flour, and then we're going to use a half fat ratio. So 180 grams of fat, but that's 90 grams of vegetable suet and 90 grams of, if I've done my maths right, yes, and 90 grams of butter. I like to use a mixture of butter and suet because I think it gets the best optimum flaky pastry. With 150 ml water roughly and a bit of salt, and that's the pastry, really easy. So first of all, in a really large pan, I want you to fry the bacon lardons, so thick lardons, which means posh word for chunks, in a large pan. You don't need any oil because you get the natural fat from the bacon anyway. You need to fry that for about 5 to 10 minutes really, just until you get it really crispy. And then just remove the bacon with a slotted spoon. So here I've got the diced chicken thighs, which I've diced quite thickly. And I've got 2 tablespoons of gluten-free flour, and I've got a bit of salt and pepper. And what you're going to do is you're going to coat that chicken thigh in the flour. So it's a little bit like when we made the beef mushroom casserole, one of my other videos. You're just coating that chicken in the flour and salt and pepper, and that's going to help colour it in a minute. browned my bacon, or caramelised it, and I put 2 more tablespoons of oil in that pan, and now I'm going to brown off the chicken thighs in batches. The reason why we do it in batches is, and the reason why the oil should be nice and hot, is because we want to fry this chicken, we want to colour this chicken, we don't want it to sweat. So we'll do this in batches, and then I'll put this chicken into the same bowl as with the bacon. Takes about 5 minutes each sort of batch. So at this point I've browned all the chicken in batches and removed the slotted spoon, and now I've added the 2 tablespoons of oil. I've added the onions finely diced, the mushrooms, the garlic, the fresh thyme and the dried mixed herbs. And what that's going to do now is I'm going to sweat that down for 10 minutes. So the chicken I wanted to fry and colour, but at this point I just want to soften and sweat these ingredients. It does reduce down, so there's not much room in that pan, is there? My students love my jokes, really, honestly, I promise. Mushrooms have sweated down really nicely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reintroduce my mushrooms and bacon, and I'm just going to add my 100 ml of wine, white wine. And all I'm going to do is I'm literally just going to bubble that down just for 2 minutes, just to remove any harshness from the alcohol. I'm going to add all of my chicken stock, so that 800 ml of chicken stock. And I'm going to cook this on a medium heat, stirring every so often for 45 minutes. Now I know I've shown you this before, but I thought I might as well show you again. So I've got 380 grams of gluten-free flour. I've got my 90 grams of salted butter and my 90 grams of vegetable suet and half a teaspoon of salt. Bear in mind this is salted butter, so if you're using unsalted butter, use a teaspoon of salt really. And now we're going to use the crumbing method, which my students will know there are 2 methods of fat incorporation when it comes into baking. You've got the crumbing in method, which is what we're using here. The crumbing in method we use for pastry, and we use for like biscuits and stuff like that, and biscuits and scones as well. The other fat incorporation method is called creaming, which is what you would use for cakes and things, but pastry and biscuits use the crumbing method. And what I'm going to do is, well, I'll use 2 hands in a minute, but you're turning with fairy fingers, nice and light. You're going to push the fat in between your fingers, and you're going to turn this mixture into fine breadcrumbs. Add 150 ml of cold water. Make sure it's cold. If you add hot water, you're going to end up with a sludgy mess. But I've added roughly about 150 ml water, and then I'm going to bring this pastry together with my fingers. If you find it needs a splash more water, don't be scared, add a splash more water, but you want to make sure you have a nice dry pastry. You do not want a sticky pastry, otherwise it's going to be difficult to roll out later. So there we go, I've got a nice orb of gluten-free pastry. I'm going to cling film that, put that in the fridge to rest. So my filling has thickened up beautifully, and I'm just going to finish it now. So I'm going to add my 100 ml of double cream, and continuing on a low heat, I'm just going to cook that for a further 5 minutes just to get that creaminess in. So that pie filling has done all of its cooking, and I'm just going to double check seasoning just before I finish it. So, oh wow, if I do say so myself, that seasoning is perfect. I'm not going to add any more to that, so I'm going to allow that filling to cool. So here I've rolled out about 2/3 of the gluten-free pastry, quite thick as you can see, and a little bit of tips. Oh, and I've buttered a nice big pie dish as well. A little bit of tips regarding gluten-free pastry. What's really nice about this is you can see all the little specks of suet. I love this type of pastry. But when it comes to gluten-free pastry, sometimes it can be quite difficult rolling it out. It can crack because it doesn't have that, because it doesn't have that gluten. It doesn't have that elasticity that you look for in normal pastry. Where you can stretch. Gluten-free pastry doesn't stretch; it just breaks. Okay, but don't panic. Okay, if you find it's too dry, just add a splash of water to it. If you find it's too sticky, add a bit more gluten-free flour to it. And when we move this, which I need 2 hands for really, so when we transfer this into that buttered dish, if there are any cracks, if it doesn't come up in one piece, you can just use a little bit of pastry to glue in any gaps, so don't panic, okay? So I'm going to put this into my base. I've lined my pie dish and I put my filling in, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll the rest of the pastry out, fairly thin, And I'm going to cut it into strips. I'm going to make like a closed lattice effect. So it's going to be like lines, lines, lines of pastry. Lines, lines, lines of pastry. See, you can see I've created this lattice. And then what I'm going to do with the holes in the lattice, I'm going to make some little leaf decorations. I'm not going to lie, that is such a thing of beauty. That took me quite a while, that leaf decoration. But got all those leaves in there and the lattice. I'm just going to brush that with beaten egg, and I'm going to bake that in an oven at 190 degrees fan for about an hour. I know that's a long time, but it's quite a big pie. This pie serves, if you served it on its own, it would serve 4, but if you serve it with like mash, I'm going to serve it with mash, buttered peas and broccoli and an onion gravy, I think that would serve 6. So after 1 hour of baking, that is my gluten-free chicken, mushroom and bacon pie.